basically, in these conversations where we talk about, ultimately what we're going to talk about here is leadership and how us as individuals can impact retention, right? So we can have conversations about systemic retention, like what we do, pay, equity, those kinds of things, policies, procedures, etc. But this one is really about us and how we show up as leaders, where we can impact retention, right? And so in having those conversations about us and who we are and what we're doing, the decisions we're making, how we're talking to people, etc., the ask is just that we would be brave, right, in this moment and have a brave space to have the conversation. So we're owning our intention and impact in the conversation, focusing on ourselves, because that's what this is really about, asking questions, all of the like. So we will talk about 3 things. The first one is retention, the power of retention focused strategies. So why retention matters, authentic and empathetic leadership. And then we'll talk about vision to action. So you guys will come out of it with an action plan for what you might want to do. So I start off with this story about broccoli. Yes, broccoli. So I have, please come up. No, it's fine. It's only a couple of us. So please come up and join us. I've already retained you. So we are just it's turning into sort of a roundtable discussion, which is fine because we will have a livelier chat once we get toward the back end of this. But so I have 5 kids. My kids are aged 18 to 5. I have 18, 12, 10, 8, and a 5-year-old. I'm pretty good. I actually would venture to say I'm very good at keeping humans alive, right? Because they can tell you when they want to eat. Broccoli, anything green, honestly, no. Those things die because they don't grab me and be like, hey, I'm hungry. I have a friend, though, who does very well with that. She picked up gardening, and she's amazing at it. She's all these plants, and she does stuff, and she keeps trying to give me a plant. I can't. Anyway, she had grown something. I don't remember what she grew. It was like tomatoes or something. I could be misremembering. I only really remember the broccoli, okay? So, but anyway, she had her harvest, and the season was changing, and so I asked her, I was like, so what are you growing next? And she said, I'm going to grow broccoli. I was like, okay, cool. So you're just going to go out, plant it, grow it, water it, right? I was like, so when you doing it? She's like, no, I can't yet. I said, why not? And she said, well, I'm going out to my plot every day. So it was a community garden. She had a specific area, right? She's like, I'm going out every day and I'm tracking the amount of direct sunlight my plot gets. And she said, I can't it's not a good idea for me to plant broccoli right here because broccoli requires 8 hours of sunlight, right? And before she planted it, she had to make sure that it was an environment in which her broccoli could thrive. Now, sometimes when it comes to hiring and recruiting, we don't do that work first. We don't look at the environment in which we are putting people and ensure that people are going to be placed in places, right? Like job placement here, that they're going to be placed in the places that they feel that they can thrive. And so for my friend, she was going through and making sure that her plot had 8 hours of sunlight before she even planted. Now, in this particular case, when we're talking about retention, we're essentially talking about things that are already planted, right? But some people are thriving and some people aren't. And so when we go and we just want to recruit and we want to hire and we want to do all that, and we're spending time in recruiting and we're spending time in hiring and we're spending time doing all of these things, have we asked a question yet about the environment that we're in, right? And whether or not we can actually retain the people that we have. So that's the big question here of what that is. So in your opinion, like, why does retention matter? Like, as I bring up that story, like, does it bring up anything for you that you can remember where you're like, oh yeah, I saw that. How about you? Here you go.
I would say retention matters because you invest so much time and energy training a new person. And when they finally get the job, let's say 6 months later, a year, and you're happy. And then if they leave, you got to start all over again. And it's just that cycle.
Anybody else? Retention.
I say from a ton of percent. I've been there, done that. From a professional development, I'm 66 years old and I've had 14 jobs, which is probably normal for someone my age. If there was better retention in the places I've worked, of course, a lot of them went out of business, but if there was better retention, I probably would be where I am today, which I'm pretty happy with. But I'd probably be 44, not 66. But it's, a lot of jobs you're just collecting a paycheck and you're staying there and you're running out the clock. Right. And you could have been at another place and I think about that when I do professional development in workforce development.
All right. I think that if you are very good at retention, right, then also your productivity is probably also pretty, right? Because if people are motivated to stay, they're motivated likely to work. They enjoy, their environment. And I think, you probably have all better anecdotes than I do as a new supervisor and JDOL, having, done some of that that type of work before. But in general, most studies will say that as well, right? So I think that's why it's important too, because it's important for the work that you lead.
Absolutely. All of the reasons. And you're right. When people want to be at a place, right, they will be showing up in the spirit of them and with the intention of them staying. You can kind of always tell that someone is ready to go when they stop showing up, stop doing certain things, little mistakes start happening, not checking things. You can kind of tell when someone is starting to do that. And sometimes it's, it could be it could be like a conflict. It could be burnout. It could be low resources. It could be a lot of different things. It doesn't actually have to be intentional, like the intention to be bad at what they're doing, right? There's not just that. So when we're looking at that, and this is on the first page, is sometimes when I'm called in, right? So I do this sort of work, and I'll have organizations particularly reach out to me if they want to recruit and hire diverse populations, some sort of population that they don't have. And this could be people with disabilities. It could be women. So I work in the fire department. They are working on trying to increase the number of female firefighters. And I always ask this question first, because I'll usually get questions about where can I go find people recruiting, right? Krystina, can you come in and tell us where we can recruit females to be firefighters? Or they'll say, Krystina, can you help us in our interview process to make sure that we are not unintentionally, right, missing this demographic when they're interviewing, right? Those are the two questions I get. And then my question then is like, but what are we doing about this? What are we doing about retention? Because in theory, it doesn't matter if I give you the best blueprint for recruitment and then I give you all of the ways to eliminate your bias in hiring, if when they get there, they're gonna leave. Now, I can do it, and you can pay me the money to do it, right? And my bills aren't paid with lollipops and rainbows. So I might, I might do it. But if my intention though, for me and as a person, part of my value and part of what I'm doing is I want to help people work in places where they thrive, where they grow, where they're included, where they are treated well, or they perceive that they're being treated well, right? Those sorts of things. So I'm hesitant to help an organization recruit and hire a different demographic if they've never asked this question, right? If they've never asked the broccoli question. So that's what we're looking at today. Like, we're looking at what does it mean to have a three-prong approach to workforce development issues that isn't just about increasing recruitment efforts, right? Or working on hiring strategies, interview strategies, but what if we also look at who we already have? Because what else is true? If you guys have ever had the experience, I have, but have you all ever had the experience where you needed to leave an organization and you loved your job, right? But you transitioned? What sort of things did you consider before you left? You considered money. What else did you consider about your original position? You were getting ready to leave. How much energy it takes to make the shift. What else? Did you have something? I just handed you.
That's okay. The emotional factor of it.
Yeah.
Because if you're at a job that you really love,
Mm-hmm.
it was a difficult decision.
It was a difficult decision.
To say, yes, I'm leaving.
It is.
Because money was part of that decision
Yep.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
And my growth and my future was part of that decision.
It was. And what do you think about do you think about, have you ever thought about also your position and what's going to happen to it? The work that you were doing? What was that conversation internally like? Anybody? What was that conversation like? You thought about the work you were doing. What did you think? What kind of questions did you have? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. You just left.
I was mean. I was really mean about
Yeah.
it. That was sad because it was emotional.
Yep.
7 years investment. And I think they screwed up because you got a lot of experience. And really all they had, it wasn't money. It wasn't, in my case, money. It was anger.
Yeah.
All they had to do was just adjust a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would have, well, that was before the Great Recession.
Yeah.
There was a lot of layoffs. That was
Yeah.
coming, you know. So a lot of, unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of our problems I've seen in my life was
Mm-hmm.
companies gone out of business.
Yeah. Right. And if you are angry and you leave, deuces. Right? Kind of and not. If you're not angry and you leave, which I've had this experience, I care about who comes next. Because if it was an emotional decision like that one, and not only did you as an employer put a lot into me, but I also put a lot into this work. And I left because of money, or I left because of this. And I actually care about who comes after me. And when you have a person leaving a position who cares about who comes after them, they put in the effort to help you recruit somebody that would be successful in that role. Right? So even if they have to leave, yes.
Can I add a pronoun? So
Yes.
It's not always who comes after you. It's also what comes after you.
In what way?
Right. So like the solution for the vacancy,
Yes.
what you're leaving,
Yes.
I'd be happy to see anyone occupying that.
Yes.
That's teachable or trainable,
Mhm.
could carry that work or make it better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy because
Mhm.
what I care about the work.
Yes.
I care about the end
Yes.
goal
Yes.
of that work.
Yes.
My investment is generally to the work and the people we're serving.
Yes.
As a civil servant.
Yes.
As people who serve people.
Yes.
So I don't care if, they brought Jenny, who has to wear glasses and I didn't.
Yes.
No, she could put on glasses.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But as long as, the supports are there to help do that so that the end product doesn't suffer as a result. So
Right.
I don't care who comes after me is what I want to say. It's not about the
Right.
person they fill it with.
Right.
It's about that the things could either stay afloat or improve for me.
Right.
Because
We
I was so
care-
invested in that.
Right. We care about the continuation of the work. If we cared about the role, and if we were leaving because of, some fact, we weren't angry, we weren't disgruntled, we do still care about the role, but we have to transition. We do care about what happens afterwards, right? And in that way, we may go out and we may have had somebody that we know of that would be great. Or we may be able to speak well of the position. We may be able to go out. The point of this is that depending on how we lead, the people that we lead can actually be a part of that recruitment and hiring plan for you, if they're not leaving in a way that they don't care about what happens next. And if you want to have that happen, where it's not always just people being like, I'm leaving, I don't care what happens, and leaders are all floundering, wondering what they're going to do next because everyone keeps leaving. If we consider the buy-in, right, and the retention and the missionally minded way that we could have staff be are the people that we lead, then it may not always have to, it's possible that it won't always have to be on us only to be the ones that are a part of that recruitment and that hiring plan. Recruitment and hiring plans, when I'm involved in, when I'm called in, are always from the perspective of the leadership. And the part that's missing is, what does it mean to include the perspective of the people working in that plan? Because at the end of the day, people are going to leave. So what does it mean to consider bringing that perspective into this by way of how they are experiencing their work and how they can be a part of that planning for you?
It's funny. You made me think of where I work, and we have front desk. The receptionist is, we didn't have a receptionist. When they're not available, it wreaks havoc, because then they have to distribute that responsibility among everybody. Nobody likes it because everyone's busy. So what do you mean I got to cover the front desk for an hour? But every time that they hired someone, a young person, maybe with different aspirations and goals, they wouldn't stay long. So everyone's happy. Yay, we hired someone. 8 months later, they left. Yay, we hired another person. 6 months later, they left. Yay, we hired, and you see them actively looking for jobs on the computer screen, like recruitment flyers. It's incredible. So I finally told management, guys, it's okay to look at the older population. And I have to be careful how I speak, because I don't want to sound like ageism. Is that the word? But guess what? It was like everyone, they were looking for young people. And no. And I'll tell you one thing, at the last, I was on the panel the last time, and, I'm not going to say that I was profiling or that we were, and I don't want to give the wrong impression, not that we were, but in my mind, I was looking forward to interviewing someone who was senior, right? And not someone fresh out of college or what have you, or high school. And guess what? The person's been with us for like 2 years. And it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the question of, like, when I gave my story about the broccoli. Sometimes people have this idea of a certain demographic that they want in a particular role, and they get a bunch of turnover because they never ask the question of if the demographic that they're targeting for that role, while to the exclusion of other demographics, if that demographic that they've decided is the best would even thrive in that environment, period. And when you don't ask that question and you continue to do the same thing, you continue to wreak havoc, because people leave every 6 months. And you find people that are obviously not invested because they're looking for things. They're looking for other roles. I mean, that's exactly how that happens, which means that your recruitment and hiring efforts actually fall flat, because that's not the problem. The problem isn't the recruitment and hiring. The problem is what you have decided fits there and it doesn't work. And we haven't asked the question of, like, why doesn't it work and what do we need to do and consider differently? You might need to stop thinking that there's a certain type of person that fits this role to the exclusion of others. Number one. Number two, you might need to rethink the role. You might have a role that is consistently under-resourced, and it doesn't matter who you put in it, it's not going to work. You might need to, like, there might be things you have to rethink about that, but as long as you don't but see, the question, when you ask the question about recruiting or you ask a question about hiring, those two things that I just mentioned don't bubble up in that conversation. The things that I'm positing here bubble up in a retention conversation. It doesn't come up in a recruitment or hiring conversation, right? So if you're wanting those answers to that question, which we should, then really you're not having a recruitment hiring conversation. You're having a retention conversation, and the retention conversation happens with the people that are already there.
So for me, the thought is, what is the position? To your point, seems like it's a very entry-level position that has little opportunity for advancement.
And you're right.
So in our line of work, we purchase services from providers, job coaches. It's a stepping stone job. So you have to know that going in, and then be able to prepare for that as long as you have a line behind them.
As long as you have a line behind them.
So you're trying to recruit from wherever you can recruit, because it's all about professional development. So you did ask a question, what am I thinking about my job when I'm leaving it? First of all, I created an opportunity for someone behind me because I got an opportunity to move up. And it's creating the career pathway, which is today's initiative under the Department of Labor and everybody.
Right. And a person leaving who isn't happy there, who's disgruntled there, cares not about any of the pipeline happening after them. They don't care. They're not going to do it. They're just going to leave. So now we get to these things. So there's a little, if you go to a couple of the next pages, and if you want, I have a work like PDF up here if you want it. If you go to a couple of next pages, there's a thing that says right here, the Great Resignation lessons learned. So we learned a few lessons from the Great Resignation, which happened COVID 2020, 2021, 2022. All of that happened, right? So one of the first things that we learned, there's many lessons here, but one of them is that 87% of people, 80% of Americans are embracing flexible work, right? A lot of times fully remote, but at least flexible. Because what's interesting about that is there were many positions, and I know people that were in them, that they were wanting flexible work when some of the things were happening, right? On the last couple of years, let's say 2018, 2017, when certain jobs were going, flexible. I mean, I worked in the federal government at one point, and they were doing things as a climate control measure, right? To have less commuters on the road, they were including flexible work, right? And then you had some roles that were not offered that because according to the organization, it could not be done from anywhere else. Y'all remember that? Couldn't be done anywhere else. Can't do it from home. And then COVID happens. And then nobody can go outside. And all of a sudden, all these companies learn how to make inflexible work flexible. And they always knew that it was like that. But right, one thing that's not going to happen is a company, if their bottom line is impacted, any organization, you're going to figure it out. You have to figure it out. So they were forced to figure it out. Well, now that it's been figured out, people are not wanting to go back to saying, well, it can't be done. No, it can, because we all saw that. 87% of Americans, if offered flexible work, accepted. 87%. The other thing is culture is make or break. So toxic workplaces, number one predictor of turnover. Employees leave managers, they don't leave companies. People leave people. Now, in the business world, we like to sometimes think that business and relational, like the relational aspect, the personal aspect, are completely separate, but that's not true. Studies don't say that. Studies show that those things are 1,000% connected, and people leave people. People stay for people, and people leave people. If you are in a great working environment, you may even turn down a higher paying position because you don't know what type of people you're going to end up with if you walk out that door. So you may even stay.
The devil you know. Versus the devil you don't know.
You may even stay, right? So that's the other thing that happened. COVID taught us, right? I don't have to. Not only that, but when you take the flexible, like remote work, right? What also changed in remote work? Now, for me, I do miss at times being able to work next to people and see people and all of that. But you know the part I don't miss? Inner office politics that are wild. Nobody misses that.
That's why Aaron doesn't work with me anymore.
That's why we don't miss it. We don't miss it. So one of the things that is here is MIT found that toxic culture is 10 times more likely to attribute to attrition than compensation. Actually, right? The other thing that we've learned, purpose and growth are non-negotiable. This is why it's hard to retain people in positions that don't have a growth path. Because people want to know that what they're doing matters and they want to be able to grow. So when you have people in a position that necessarily, by definition of the position, doesn't have a lot of growth, you have to do with that. You have to accept that and understand there will likely be turnover, because nobody spends their career being like eventually, as you grow and as you mature, you want more, you want to grow more, you want to move, you want to do this. There's all these things that you envision for your career, right? We're all conditioned to have these, like, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? So there's a path that we take. So this idea that you can just have someone in a role that's just going to stay there without understanding what their purpose is or without having growth opportunities, non-starter.
Yep.
Right? And the other thing is that authentic leadership drives loyalty. Gallup, 70% of the variance in employee engagement, managers account for 70% of that. Again, employees leave managers. People leave people. People leave people. So the way that we lead very much impacts who stays and who goes wherever we are. The way that we lead. Which means that in addition to other things like, again, pay equity, payment, compensation, things like that, the way that we show up as leaders matters. Because if I think as a leader, this is great, because I am loyal to you as who you've been as a leader, when I have to leave for whatever reason, I also care about what happens to you as the leader, right, filling this position. I care about that. And if I am in a situation where I can navigate that well, I would rather work with you, right? With you understanding I have to go, and me work with you to make sure that whatever happens next, whoever comes in, whatever that is, that's solid for you. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to leave you, like, we've built this professional relationship and I care about it. That sort of dynamic is built by how we lead. And when we don't do that, then we have people just walking out the door. And walking out the door and don't care. Now, the other thing that's happening with the younger workforce is the younger workforce is fully understanding that, why do I have to give a 2-week notice if when you fire me, you don't? Right.
I always gave a 2-week notice. No, not all the time.
When
No,
did you
I
give it
actually,
up?
when I was sore, I left that day.
Yeah.
And they said, how come you give me a 2-week notice? Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to go into the language.
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
But I always thought that. Well, you need a 2-week notice. When they let you go, they're not giving you it.
Yeah.
It's that afternoon, clean your desk, and they'll make,
Yeah.
Take this job and shove it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take this job and go.
The human connection part, right? Like when you say you're leaving and you don't give me any notice, don't come back and ask me for anything later though. So when you don't give that 2-week notice, you're saying, I really didn't care for the way that you managed me and I don't want to ever come back here. But when you give that notice, it's like, I've enjoyed my stay here, so I do want you to have somebody else. So I think for me, that's where that difference in the 2-week walk away, if you're walking away and I don't ever want to come back again, then yeah, okay, today, never. But especially when you're young, business can go up and down, so you don't know. So you don't want to always just walk away. Let me drop the mic and exit left, because you might need to come back through that door one more time to get to that next level.
Like burning the bridge.
Yeah.
Which is true, right? Yes. And I will tell you, the younger workforce puts that a little bit lower on the totem pole. Because at the end of the day, history has proven and experience has shown them that they could do the best that they want. They can give the best of their effort and they'll still get burned by a bigger company or an organization or a leader that's self-serving, that's out for their own gain or out for their own promotions or whatever the case may be. And at the end of the day, they can do their best and budget cuts and you're gone, right? So if you want to have something, especially in the younger workforce, something that says, I want to let you know that I'm about to leave so we can work together to fill this role, that's now becoming a part of how we show up as leaders. We're no longer given that. We earn that as leaders. It's not automatic. Not anymore. Because we've learned that not really how it works. And collectively, you have a whole generation that's refused. And when they refuse, I mean, they're also the ones you want to hire. Right? Yes.
Quick question. So despite all this,
Yes.
today's world, our youth specifically are influencers.
Yes.
And the Great Resignation, the way I understand it, started with them. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they get a guest
Mm-hmm.
who's paying their college loans for them,
Mm-hmm.
they're done. How does today's world of social media and influencers and influencing impact everything that you're talking about here?
That's a really good question. And I think we're going to find that out over the next couple of years. So this is what's also happened. We have had, and I've seen, particularly, okay, so I'm an elder millennial, and I will say it now because I'm an elder one. You wouldn't catch me calling myself a millennial anything about 10 years ago. But I'm grown. You know what I mean? So I'll say it. And Gen Z's younger than me. So there they got. I caught a lot of heat as a millennial, okay? But this is what I'm saying. I've seen Gen Z influencers like that in the workplace. And they've said some stuff. And you know what also happens with those Gen Z influencers? If you follow them, not a lot of them, but a decent amount of them have lost their jobs.
They're not.
Go ahead.
They're not. Look, these past couple of decades have been very interesting. Mm-hmm. I remember being in workforce in 2003 before the Great Recession, and you saw like, what was it? Every 3 or so years, the stat was, a company would cave and people were changing over. So people were forced to take on jobs. It wasn't like, back in the 70s, 60s, or 80s where people were lifers in 20 years in an organization, save for public workforce where, where we have unions or other civil service structures that keep us in, right? We're a captive audience by choice almost. But in the case of these folks, the after effects of what they saw their parents go through, and then also these are people, the influencers, they're creators. They're going to create their own reality. So they don't care. Like if they lose a job tomorrow, they're not as afraid of burning that bridge because they're like, I'll find another job. I'll create another job. I'll break that, investment trend over there, and I'll pop into the market. I'll make my own money and I'll create my own jobs and I'll work. They'll live on their own terms. They're not afraid the way we have been.
No, they're not. And this tangent of a conversation, to answer your question, is very much Gen Zers are funny. I have one. Okay. I got one. And I got alphas. Okay. And when I joke around, Gen Z will burn it all down. They really will. They have figured out ways to understand the system that they're existing in, and they make very strong decisions to stand up against it, which means it's very hard in your case to do some of these things if they are fighting the system, because it's not you. Now, one of the things that I have said to that is I've heard some, and this is an aside, but I've heard some judgment statements about, for example, job hopping, and that you'll have people that'll get into different roles every 2 years. The fact of the matter is that staying with a company for 20 years no longer sufficiently pays the bills, because most times people don't get promotions and they don't get bonuses and they don't get increases that follow inflation. So the only way for them to pay their bills is to go find another role, leverage what they have, and have an organization pay them more money than their current organization can give them a raise. So what I have had conversations with people who have been in leadership of different generations is they're like, these young kids don't even care anymore. They don't want to work. They just want a hot job. There's no loyalty. And I'm like, they have bills. They need money. They want to buy a house. They can't buy it. And your current budget doesn't pay them enough to do so. So they know they can't do it anymore. So we also have to understand, right? To understand the times enough to no longer say, well, we used to keep jobs for 20. Yeah, there were also pensions. Right. We don't have that anymore. So you do have a generation that has figured that out and has learned that and is trying to problem solve and trying to figure out how they're going to make it out of this mess that they see. And the ways in which they do that will sometimes be harmful and feel problematic to the organization that employs them. But we also have to understand what they're doing and not necessarily characterize, right? Or have a character judgment of an entire generation that is quite literally figuring out how to navigate a world post pensions, post retirement, post bonuses, post COVID, like that's what's happening. And if we don't have that conversation to really understand and dig into what's actually happening, then the assessments are always going to be wrong, which means the potential solutions are always going to fall flat.
This is very interesting. I have to step out. But I wanted to just make this point. I think another piece of this is with technology, everyone's life is kind of the same. Like on a Friday night, the person at the lowest level in a company their life is not much different than the highest person. They're sitting in the same comfy chair. They're watching the same show on Netflix. When they drove home from work, they're getting in a car. The outside of the car might look different. The inside of the car is not all that, like there's this equal playing field. It's not, and I say that because we're no longer in a world where you have to work harder or get the better job to have the bigger TV. Everybody's got the big TV. They have two of them, right? So it really, I think, messes with the metric a little bit for like the desire for like, I want that. No one can buy a house. So there's not, I want a bigger house. No one can get a house. So take all those things off. We've taken, you don't have to worry about getting a bigger TV. You don't have to worry about what you're doing on Friday night. You don't have to worry about what your car looks like. Look, what are they working for? And I think that I don't necessarily know if it's going to get better, but as I think that has to be a component of it in my thought process.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so because of the purpose and growth aspect, right? And like, what is this for? Because what happened during COVID is people were literally just leaving. They were here and then they weren't. They were here and then they weren't. There was a big news story about a woman who passed away in her cubicle or in her office at Wells Fargo. Didn't find her for days. So literally this person, the last thing that they did was work. And nobody found her. And when people hear stories like that, whatever I spend my life doing needs to mean something. Now, because life had literally become too short, because we all saw it. It was big, it was young, it was all sorts of people all across the globe. So yes, you're right. There's not this, I think that interestingly, there has been some of the material gain aspect of it for like material goods feels a little less valued. What feels more valued is time and time freedom, which is why you have people that want to be influencers and want to do that. Unless you dig into the underbelly of it and realize it's really hard work. And I would never. But there's this thing. And also, what is it about influencing that makes it so attractive? It's not necessarily that influencers have all these big things. It's the time freedom that they have. It's the authenticity that they get to have. It's them just living and doing what they want to do. Like that's the thing that people are like after. And sometimes people think that money can get them there. Therefore, they will climb that ladder for money to hopefully get them there. But sometimes people say, I don't need money to get there, so they don't care. But like that's the thing that a lot of people are more after now than they were before. Because again, nobody can buy a house and nobody can do this and nobody can, like, that's how it feels. I mean, this today, my husband and I, we have 5 kids. I'm like, I have no idea. My 18-year-old just graduated and he was like, well, do I have to go? I said, where would you go? Because first of all, any apartment costs more than our mortgage. Where are you going to go? Which also as a parent, like that is a wild question because I promise, like I really felt like they would be able to. You know what I mean? So I do kind of need this worked out because I like to travel with my husband alone or have my kids be able to pay their own way, okay? Because I have 5 of them. Now, currently, I don't know how that's going to happen. And I don't know how they're going to leave, which means the conversations that my husband and I 1000% have are like, well, wherever they go, we're going to have to be the ones to leverage our properties to help them get a property. Because I have no idea. I can't figure out how that's going to happen for them with the way that this is happening. But in that case, if that's the reality that even I'm grappling with as a parent, can you imagine what that reality is for someone actually grappling with that for their own livelihood? It is incredibly hard, which means we don't have a system that they can. It used to be that, oh, even if this was toxic, I could still pay my bills. That's not true anymore. Yeah.
There's two sides of the equation.
Yes.
Inflation is the problem. But when you and I were growing up, I mean, most of my life, unemployment was the problem. I was afraid to lose my job.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of us were.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, that's not such a fear. There's plenty of jobs out there. You hit it right. And I think the younger generation knows that. They're well aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, how do I pay my bills? Mm-hmm. And you're right, it's a non-growth job. Of course they're going to leave. They're going to get their experience and out of here. Mm-hmm. That's common sense.
It is. It has nothing to. It has nothing to do with character. It's not to do with the characterization of a generation here. It has to do with the context that we exist in. And if we refuse to understand that context that we exist in and how it's different from even 20 years ago, we're losing the game, right? We're losing the game because we're not actually supporting the workforce. We're just not. Okay, so when we look at this, right, these are all the factors that impact retention, which means that this whole conversation that we're having in this room could last for hours because we could talk about each of these for at least 1 hour. But what we're talking about right now and what we're going to transition to for the next part of this is leadership. So the point of this is for you to walk away with what you can do in your organization. If you don't need any extra resources or extra money. What I like to do when I'm giving suggestions, and I'll give these to you, when I'm giving suggestions and things like that, is I like to do things that someone can do inexpensively, i.e. free. Here you go. i.e. free for just you, where it doesn't require you to have an entire overhaul of an organization. Because there are many times that I'm not always, people are like, well, this is my role and I might not feel like I have that much impact to change all of these other things. And good news, you don't. So what you have is a authentic leadership assessment. And authentic and empathetic leadership can be a catalyst to retention. Part of it and part of the empathy can come in by the conversation we just had, which was understanding the context in which your workforce exists. It's hard to have empathy for something if you don't understand it. So one thing to do, right, is to have the conversation about the context that the workforce is in, and let's not judge, right, what we're seeing. Again, like you said, if there's no growth, it doesn't make sense to stay, right? So understanding that and then navigating that. So authentic leadership and leadership studies in general, academically in higher ed is fairly new, but authentic leadership is characterized by transparency, integrity, and a strong adherence to individual values and beliefs where leaders are self-aware and genuine in their relations with followers. This approach fosters trust, collaboration, and aiming to create a positive organizational culture. A place where people want to live, want to be, where people want to work. So some examples are these here: staying true to your values, et cetera, et cetera. Acknowledging your limitations and showing up as a leader. And we'll talk about some of these things. So in your workbook thing, there is an assessment that you can take. So we're going to take it. You're going to answer the question, scale of 1 to 5. 1 is you strongly disagree, up to 5 that you strongly agree with the statement. And then we'll add up our scores. We do things this way because that's how it's always been. That's just the way we did it. That's not balanced processing. That's not thoughtful consideration. That's not consideration of what was then that is no longer now and how we need to edit or make a different decision. Authentic leadership, one of the components of it is the ability to thoughtfully consider your options and make a choice. Not to say, well, we just can't because we never have, right? So you can look at where you got there. So analyzing data objectively before making decisions, seeking multiple perspectives, which is really important. Not just the perspective of the one person that has to make the decision, but that a leader, an authentic leadership, that person goes out and seeks out information that they don't have or seeks out input from perspectives that they don't have access to before they make decisions. So how many times have we been in a situation where a leader has made a decision for how everyone else is going to work and they've never done that job? So they actually don't know the true impact of what it is that they just did because they never actually asked the people who do it. So they made a decision and now you got to deal with it. And they're up there like, what's the big deal? And you're like, there's 100 big deals. Authentic leadership doesn't do that. Authentic leadership says, hey, there might be some things that I don't know. So like, I'm going to go figure that out. I'm going to have conversations. I'm going to listen. I'm going to look at the people that I'm leading and ask them, right, what this is. Relational transparency is the way that you show up with the people that you lead. So relational transparency is about being genuine in your actions. A big one, and some people will do that, but also one thing that kind of fails, like we don't do or we're not perhaps accustomed to doing or don't see a lot of leaders doing, is admitting mistakes. Saying when you made a wrong decision. Maybe there was a decision you thought you made at the time, but it wasn't the right one. Being able to say that. Because the impact of that, right? If you as a leader, like if you've been in an organization where you've seen leaders cover up all their stuff, the people cover up all their stuff.
I just want to endorse that. Like one of my best supervisors in my estimation he was a knowledgeable guy. Sometimes he'd let things drop and you're like, okay, Victor all of a sudden has, rest in peace, Victor. Victor all of a sudden has a dentist appointment every single time a difficult customer is coming in. Every single time that guy had an appointment, he had a sudden dental appointment. But when Victor messed up, Victor would say, I'm sorry. And you know what? I loved working for him. Versus the guy who always tried to write me up because I didn't do what he wanted to do, how he wanted to. He stifled me and I couldn't. But anyway, just wanted to.
Oh, yeah. Because in that case, when you see a leader modeling what it means to be resilient, what it means to make a mistake, what it means to not have all the answers because no one ever does, then you also can go get support from that person to grow in your ability to make better decisions. You don't want to go and look like you've made a mistake to somebody who is perfect. It's not safe. It doesn't feel emotionally safe. This is what we want about like relatability. This is why we have people that are more relatable than others. And the people that tend to be the most relatable are the people who are transparent even in the good and bad times because they're like humans just like us. But the other people that never do that, right? They're not relatable and it's harder to build trust with them. It's harder to do that. And you don't want to stay with those people because you end up being fake. You have to pretend you're infallible when you're not. And because you know that, then you're fake the whole time. So you're always in fear that someone's going to find you out. And lastly, internalized moral perspective. So this idea, right, that you as a leader make your own ethical decisions. And us as people being okay to stand 10 toes down in what our ethical decisions are. 10 toes. This is right. This is wrong. This is my boundary for what is okay. Even if the organization, this says it, this is my line. Now, this is difficult given all the other things that we said, but there is a question here of imagine a world where we were free to stand 10 toes down in what our values are, especially as it relates to other people and people that we lead. Right? So here we go. I'm going to put it up on the screen, but we have a couple. So I'm going to put it up here because it's probably going to be easier. But I kind of want us to talk about it, and we'll just do one because I think that since it's all of us here, I think we should just get out early because it's not that many of us. But I want to, unless you don't, and it's perfectly fine, but I want to do this. I also put this up on the thing, but I want us to look at this scenario and then feel free to talk about it. So here we go. So this is one of them. And this is on the little, this is in the app, by the way, if you just want to have them as a conversation starter for your teams or anything else. This is on the app. But here's the one scenario. A high-performing employee requests to transfer to another department. During their exit interview with HR, they revealed they felt micromanaged for months. You're their manager. You're this person's manager. And this manager goes in their exit interview and says, you're surprised. You've always prided yourself on giving autonomy to strong performers. Other team members have since requested transfers as well. So there's 3 questions on the next page. And this is what we're looking at and what we're talking about, which is number 1, this one. Which is number 1, there's 4 components that we had. Which one is this one about of the 4? Which one is this one about? Could be more than one, yeah. But what's one of them?
Self-awareness, because they're surprised. Mm-hmm. Anybody, I don't want to be a hog and take them all. I'm seeing a few of them.
Go ahead. Oh, I have to think about it because I was thinking about self-awareness.
The one, balance processing, seeking multiple. Oh, it would be relational.
I guess I'll wait till she goes. From balanced processing.
Yeah, what do you think? Balanced processing, why? How so?
Because, right, they weren't analyzing the information they had in front of them, mm-hmm. right? Or even seeking other people's input, with regards to decisions that needed to be made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I'll dovetail or piggyback on that, making decisions based on evidence, because high performing versus the emotion that created the situation.
Yep.
Rational transparency, because there's a lack of dialogue. If you're suddenly hearing, oh, geez, I guess I wasn't talking to you before. What, why didn't you say that before? Well, you probably never asked,
Yeah. So there's multiple here. And I did skip one. What's the main issue here in this scenario? What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem here? We have a high-performing employee and we have a manager who this performing employee wanted to move, and the manager is like, I'm surprised. I had no idea, but then other team members want to leave too. What's the problem here?
Take a hint, sweetheart.
Yeah.
Oh my God, is the manager the problem and the employers are good, but the manager has to go?
Maybe. See? Huh? Test.
And the weak. Sorry, because as a leader, I feel like you need to understand your strengths and weaknesses as a leader, and also you need to understand as far as with your staff, so you can know how to manage properly. In my opinion.
Yes. Right now. The issue right now is that this manager thinks that and look at this. This manager says they prided themselves on this. This is a great, bright light for this manager. But what does the data say? You're wrong, sweetheart. You're not right. You're not right. So it's an opportunity for self-awareness for this person, whoever this person is. Okay, so let's say you're the manager, because we're not perfect people and we might be leading people and get this. What do you do? This is you. What do you do?
So one thing I might do understanding the situation better, is the remaining team members maybe going to talk to them, get some more insight and better perspective on what's going on with the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the solutions here for this manager, one thing that could be done, go talk to your people. Because like we said, there's obviously a lack of relational transparency. There's something that you thought was going on that's not what it is, that you don't know. And if, this is the other thing too, if this is a scenario and you go to your people and they say something, nothing's wrong, you have a bigger problem. What is the bigger problem that you have? If you know this information and you decide, well, my next course of action is going to be to talk to these other team members, right? Because they're still on my team. And they all say, no, it's fine. There's a bigger problem. You're not off the hook. What's the problem? They're afraid. What else?
I was going to say maybe they don't trust you.
They don't trust you. They don't trust you. And there are times where I've seen this scenario and I know what's being said, and then they go and say, well, that's not what. And then if you don't press further, they'll say, well, I don't know. Maybe it was just a fluke. They were just, no. My response is they're either afraid to tell you the truth or they don't trust you, which is also an element of fear. They don't trust what's going to happen. And so there's something that you need to look into, right, about why you are obviously a person that isn't trustworthy, because when they have the opportunity to say something, right, without negative consequences, they will say it. But when they go to say it to you, they're not saying anything at all. There's something happening there that you've got to dig into. So sometimes the lack of feedback is not a positive thing, because people should want to be able to share things. If they're never sharing anything with you, we got to uncover and unpack why. Because those are the people that are going to leave without notice.
Seriously, when you asked this before, what do you do? I even thought like, well, it looks like they already mistrust her. So should she not go to HR or to her superiors and she should get some feedback? Because this girl needs help.
Yeah. Well, let's look at this one. This one's a little bit more difficult. And we could have differing opinions here on what we do. But it's true. So your company is going through budget cuts. You guys are the leaders. You're the leader here, and your company is going through budget cuts. Upper management asks you to hold off on sharing this information with your team, even though you know that 2 team members are getting ready to make significant financial commitments based on this job. You know for a fact that one of them is in the process of buying a house, and you know for a fact that one of them is getting ready to go to school. What's the issue that we have here? What do we have? What are we looking at?
Internalize moral.
Your issue here is what, to tell or not to tell?
Right.
Internalize moral perspective, making those decisions under pressure.
So right here, right, the issue here is that this leader it knows information on both sides of this coin and needs to decide what they're going to do and how they're going to navigate it. And the component of authentic leadership here is authentic leaders have an internalized moral perspective. They stand 10 toes down on their morals, ethics, and values. But you also have to keep your job. So, what do you do? You can't say it. So this example is find a way to say it without saying it.
Absolutely.
Find a way to say it without saying it. What else? Anything else? What could you do? Somebody in here might just say it. I don't know. Is there anybody in here that would just say it?
You know what? I consider myself to be ethical or conscientious, but is it bad that I'm thinking I would not share that information with the employee because of the directive that I received, not to say anything? I don't think I would, despite knowing, that someone's going to buy a new house and so on. Mm-hmm. So is that wrong?
Good question. What is our opinion?
Because they're saying that it's going through budget cuts.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that mean? Because they're not necessarily saying that leads to layoffs or.
The assumption is that it will.
Okay. There's an assumption that, guess what? Someone's going to be gone.
Somebody's going to be gone, and it might be them.
It's a hard one because you're going to lower morale of everybody and say, guess what?
Is it assumed that
you
you
ever
know,
watch
though?
Survivor? You know.
I mean, I'm thinking about her. Is it assumed that you know? Because if no one can assume that you know, you almost, if your internalized moral perspective isn't deep, then you would probably say, well, I didn't know. But being that I rate high on that, I'd find a way to say it without thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I would still be in compliance with what I was directed to do, but I'd make sure that the person wasn't screwed.
But human nature, because let's say that you try to convey that message indirectly, or you didn't get it from me, but human nature is that employee is going to tell someone else, and then it's going to spread. Yeah. But how do you convey that? Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough call. It's a tough call.
This is not an easy scenario.
So here's the thing. It's a part about knowing how to be a good leader. Because I feel like when you are a leader, you have to kind of read the room.
Yep.
And when you do have employees, there's certain things or you have to know how to speak to each employee. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes you have to be a bit of a mind reader, right? And you may be in a position, well, you get this information, right? You may withhold the information from the certain person because one, you're not supposed to say it anyway, right? But you may not say anything, like she may not say anything, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing because it really depends on who you're speaking to. Some people they may have the job, but they don't have the maturity to get the hint, as you would probably give them some sort of a hint, like say it, not say it. Because you can do something like that to me and it'll just be a head nod, like, okay, I get it. You don't even have to go into detail. I get it. I need to, figure out what I have going on. But you have to really kind of know how to approach,
Our office is going through analyses, for possible changes in procedures. There are very general, bland ways of saying it. And the person then could infer what that could mean for them. And now you haven't said it.
Could you flip the switch and let your boss know that you know this about the two employees?
There's another one.
That's the best way.
Let them know that they know. If you trust that they're not going to do anything funny with it, but let them know, right? If you are being led by an authentic leader, y'all could maybe have that conversation. It's another conversation. And say, hey, is there something we can communicate? Is there something that we can communicate? I don't feel comfortable communicating nothing. Is there something I can say? Now, the thing is that there are a lot of different, in most of these scenarios, so this is the interesting part, right, about this sort of leadership and being a leadership in these spaces, in these difficult situations, is that the foundation here is you have to know where you stand and what you're okay with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If we as leaders, if we're going to assume a leadership position, we have to know where we are. Mm-hmm. We have to do the work in ourselves to know what is okay with us and what's not. Because if I know that this is not okay with me, then I might figure out a way to get this handled. Because what's not okay with me, and I'm sure it's not okay with me, is not saying anything at all. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not necessarily right or wrong because there's also this part. It's gray and it's nuanced and it matters because at the end of the day, you may also be in a person that is relying on this financial situation and you telling something and then getting caught and getting fired may be a problem. Mm-hmm. So you do have to balance that. But the key is like, so this is the thing, when you navigate this and imagine over the course of being a leader and people have watched you navigate these things, these different situations time and time again. Imagine what the perception is of a person that doesn't seem to have a clear line. Think about the types of decisions that you might expect that person to make that doesn't have a clear line, not just in this situation, but others. Versus the type of person that you know what their line is. This is like when we talk about managers who have their people's back. Mm-hmm. You know that they have their people. It's different situations that prove that to you. So eventually you can trust that. So it's important, regardless of what the actual answer is in this scenario. The reason why internalized moral perspective matters is that it will also guide other decisions that you make, such that the employees that you have know what your line is. And if they know what your line is, then they can trust you more. If you're with a leader who is like, today I'm advocating, today I'm not, tomorrow this, you know what I mean? They're all over the place.
It's interesting. There's a scenario. 98 Tyco Adhesives, they bought the company. It was a manufacturing. I was a manager there. They bought the company. Tyco bought the company from Bethlehem, was a smaller company. They got rid of our vacation, zeroed it out, and we weren't happy. But the plant manager, who was a tough, autocratic guy, but up to that point, we thought he had our back. He justified their decision in front of everybody, and he was done. He was, from then on, well, again, the Tyco got rid of him in about 6 weeks, 6 months, because we just were, bye guy, bye. But you're saying how important it is. He could have handled that so much differently. He could have said, hey, I'm sorry, guys. This is their decision. Yeah. No, he said they were right in what they did. Yeah. But it was just an example. I just came up with that.
Right. And then how do you feel being led by somebody like that? Krystina, go ahead.
Krystina, I'm sorry. So am I right? So I feel like I heard you say, one, in these scenarios, we have to always identify where we stand, what we're okay with, right? But in the instances in which we perhaps identify an authentic leader above us, it may be a safe caveat to be able to have that conversation with them. In the cases where you don't identify an authentic leader above you that can help affect positive change, then you're going to take a different approach. Yeah. And I would never want to cast judgment on, I don't know, what's your name? Maria, on what you're saying, because again, there's so many circumstances we don't know. Yeah. You don't know the pressures that the person has. So I couldn't blame you without knowing the rest of them. But the people under you don't know that. So they'll just see you as that jerk that let us go.
One thing is true that I do appreciate, what is your name? Vito. I do appreciate what he said. And I think that is definitely the way to go. So I would definitely follow that. It didn't occur to me immediately, right? Just looking at the scenario. But at the end of the day, I think that would be the best, thing to do.
You identify an authentic leader above you, you can have
if you're safe, if you think that person you can have a conversation with. But see, this is the thing, in a scenario like this, right? Doesn't it illuminate how important this type of leadership is? Yeah. It's hard to be this type of person if we're all not being this type, if we're all not doing this, it makes it harder to do. So of course, I'm not purporting at all that this is easy. Obviously, I've given a very complicated scenario, right? But what is important is that we take a moment to ask ourselves these questions and make a decision. So that's the thing. In leadership, it's not just about decisions for other people. In my experience, I have to make a decision about the person I am first, so that I'm not going here and to and fro and I'm leading this way because so-and-so wants me to lead this way, and then I'm leading this way because so-and-so wants me to lead this way. Because at the end of the day, so-and-so might fire me too. We're all, you know what I mean? We're all in here. So what I want to do so that I can show up as a leader that I would want to have is I have to know who I am and what I am going to do.
And what your boundaries are.
And what my boundaries are, full stop. Full stop. I have to know that. So as we go ahead and end, I'll just leave this kind of thing with you, which is, so I have this example here, which is, this is all on the thing. These are the 4 things. So number 1 and 2, number 1 we did together. Number 2, it's in that little worksheet packet that you can do. Number 3 and 4, to expand this out to an organization, the organization's culture needs to be assessed. Yes. And then from there, the organization needs to have goals around what they're going to do. Now, it's possible for you in this room, as just the individuals that we are here, to action 1 and 2 on our own. And I don't think that that's not valuable. I think it's valuable and worthwhile to do so. But the next step that we talked about, right? Toxic culture, 10.4 times more of a predictor of turnover than compensation. 10.4 times more. So if we're having a conversation in our organizations, and if you want to bring this back to your organization and say, hey, let's take a look at this because we are having people leave, or we're having this, or whatever the case may be, people are transferring departments, like, you do need to understand the organizational leadership culture that you have and influence change where you can, and then create organizational goals that reflect whatever those values are so that you can retain your current talent. Right? With the understanding that when people want to be in a place but have to leave, they care about what happens after. So I know when I've worked, and honestly, this has happened, right? When you've worked at really great places, you may have gone to people and been like, that was really great. They have an opening. Maybe. But when you've worked at really bad places, you are quick to be like, never, don't go there. Right? And if you got a bunch of employees leaving with negative experiences and you're like, nobody wants to work here, that's because somebody's doing some really bad PR out there for you and you have no idea, because they didn't want to be here when they were here and they don't want any of their friends coming here either. So if you're looking for this local pool, people are here, and you got people over there saying a bunch of stuff in the rooms, in professional groups, on LinkedIn and all the other things, in people's things, that's happening. It's happening all the time. We all share that information. So not only if you just focus on recruiting and hiring, are you up against all the other things, but you're also up against those employees that didn't want to work there. And if we don't accept that as a fact, then we don't build strategies that address that, which means, again, recruitment and hiring falls flat. Because we are it's something like 3 times more likely to share a bad experience than we are a positive one. Right? When you go on Yelp reviews, when you go on Google reviews, there are people who have never reviewed anything before, and they'll put a 1-star review and say, I have never reviewed anything before, but this was so bad that I have to tell everyone else, do not come to this. Like, we will not say good things, and we will for sure say negative things. So it works the same way in the workplace. You might not have somebody that goes out and sings praises, but I guarantee you got enough people out there leaving disgruntled. You and them are not the only ones that know. Mm-hmm. You're not. The other people know what's going on. So that's where we're closing, actually, so that we can head out a little bit early, 30 minutes early, but we're going to close there. There is the action plan piece of it that's there. And then there's a little feedback form on the back that I would love to get from you if you don't mind. And then that'll be it. So I'll open it here and we're closed. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you for being here. We are such a small group, but it felt like a really intimate kind of conversation where we can dig into some things that we may not be able to do if 50 people are in a room. So I definitely appreciate, acknowledge, and I'm grateful for all you guys' presence. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yay.